Ian, I wanted to ask about all of the like military jets flying over Taiwan and into their airspace. If you're saying that really the Chinese Communist Party is not ready to invade yet, what are they doing with these flights? Are they trying to kind of wear the Taiwanese military down? Are they trying to kind of establish a new normal where everybody's just like, well, I guess that, the Chinese military is just going to keep doing this? Like, what are they doing?
Well, yes to both. Yes to both. They are doing both of those things. What they're also doing is training. They're preparing for a future invasion. This is something that they take very, very seriously. They consider it their main strategic direction. So that's what they call it. That's the jargon that the PLA uses. The main strategic direction of the PLA up until 1992 was to prepare for a future Soviet invasion, which is what they imagined the big war would be. Once the Soviet Union fell apart, and I believe it was December 91, after that, the PLA started to shift their focus. And since 1992, 1993, the main strategic direction has been preparing for a future offensive war. Previously, it was actually a defensive war. Now it's an offensive war to one day invade and occupy Taiwan while also defeating any American attempts or other international attempts to come to Taiwan's rescue. And so they do prepare. Part of those flights and part of the reasons you see so many Y-8 surveillance aircraft and intelligence gathering aircraft go up with the bombers is because they're monitoring that these are basically listening posts in the air, and they're listening. They're trying to pick up any signals that they can, communications between radar stations, any radar frequencies. If the Taiwanese should turn on any of their air defense radars, you have these computer banks that sit in the back of those PLA aircraft that will collect the signal, and they'll try to get the electronic order of battle is what they call it, the signals from those radars, so they can figure out how to better jam them in the future. The United States does the same thing. The Taiwanese do the same thing. This is part of that, that jockeying for intelligence superiority in peacetime that goes on. But it's a very serious activity in this case because they've actually started to deny the existence of the cross-strait center line, which up until last year, everybody respected that. That was a no-go zone. That was a political no-no, that you don't cross that line unless something really serious is going on, because the consequences could be so serious. Starting last year, as you guys know, they completely denied the existence of it. They said, we're no longer going to respect it. As far as we're concerned, it no longer exists, and we're going to violate it all the time now. And they are. And part of the reason they do that is because the closer they get to Taiwan, the more they violate Taiwanese airspace or Taiwan's air defense identification zone, the more likely it is that the Taiwanese are going to make mistakes, that they're going to start to turn on radars that they normally wouldn't, that they're going to start to tip their hand and show what some of their response tactics in a real fight might look like. That's all the kind of intelligence that the PLA wants to collect. But I think it's important, if you guys will allow me, to go back to that earlier point that we are just not seeing indications, despite all of these, the real remarkable increase in PLA activity against Taiwan, including political warfare, right? Propaganda, psychological operations, legal warfare. Despite all of that, and it has been a really remarkable uptick since last year, but despite that, nobody's dying. That's the real good news, is that nobody's dying. Because once people start to die, then things start to look a little darker. And what I mean by that is we don't have any reports right now that suggest a lot of PLA troops are dying in training exercises. Because generally PLA training is not highly complex. It's not very realistic. They're not doing a lot of live fire work. They're not maneuvering forces at night. All the kinds of things that lead to training deaths. We're not seeing that right now. If we thought a war was, or if they thought a war was coming soon, you would expect to see a lot of training deaths because they'd start to take it very, very seriously. We're also not seeing other kinds of death. So, for example, there's been no assassination attempts, thank God, against President Tsai or anybody in the Taiwanese government. You would expect to see that prior to an all-out war. We've not seen other indications of a pending conflict, right? We've not seen a sharp increase in murder and mayhem in Taiwan, riots, gun running, sabotage against critical infrastructure, poisoning of fuel and water supplies, long-term power blackouts, things of that nature, prison breaks. All of these are the types of things that you would expect to see if Taiwan was going to be attacked in the near future. Happily, none of that is going on right now. And so that's why I say, as far as we can tell, war is not about to break out.
Well, so it sounds like what you're saying is if China were to invade, they would be behind a lot of social chaos inside of Taiwan. Is that a typical strategy of the Communist Party?
Well, absolutely. Of course. This goes way back to the Chinese Civil War. It goes back to, this is the way the Soviet Union also operated. This is absolutely typical. This is part of their doctrine for how, first of all, how do you subvert your own government, right? Because all communist parties have had to first subvert the existing government, right? And then take over, usually after a long war, which was the case in the PLA's, in their experience. They had to fight a 22-year-long insurgency before Mao could actually stand, over the gates of Tiananmen and declare the People's Republic of China had been founded. That, in October of 1949. That was after a 22-year-long civil war, and even then, the civil war was not over, right? Because Chiang Kai-shek still had a superior air force and navy, and he was still fighting Mao up and down the coast of Fujian and Zhejiang. And there were some very major battles that actually occurred in the 1950s. And so he still hadn't won the war. But, they were in a period of crisis, and there was that constant thought that went into it. How do we destabilize Taiwan? Now, how do we, there were a lot of PLA studies that were done. How do we do to Taiwan's government on Taiwan, the ROC government, what we had previously done to it on the mainland? And there was a case in the early 1950s where there was a massive spy ring where you had these undercover PLA operatives in Taiwan that was discovered by Chiang Kai-shek's counterintelligence forces. And they were wrapped up and executed publicly to tell Mao that they had been executed and all of your undercover operatives are gone now. And so don't try to invade us because it's not going to work. The PLA invasion planning has always relied on a heavy dose of internal destabilization.
Well, I'm just wondering, because a lot of the social problems that you mentioned you would see in Taiwan if the Communist Party were actually trying to invade, you do see a lot of those sort of things happening in the United States today. Would it be possible that the Chinese Communist Party would try to distract the U.S. with internal problems to potentially make it less likely to be able to defend Taiwan in the event of an invasion?
Well, it would do that anyways. And I think it is doing that anyways. I think there's a reason why the U.S. government closed the consulate, the PRC consulate in Houston last year, when the rioting was getting very violent and very bad. I think there's a reason why the Department of Homeland Security last December came out publicly and said, listen, since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, China's government has intentionally been exporting faulty testing kits to the United States in large numbers, and has been sending us millions of fake masks and defective masks. And oh, by the way, we are being flooded by lethal opioids that are only made in China. And China doesn't have an opioid addiction problem. And very few other countries do either, which would suggest that we are specifically being targeted. No, I mean, maybe it sounds paranoid to say that, But when the U.S. government starts to come out and say, "Hey, listen, this is a very real threat," you have to start to wonder if maybe they are at a certain level trying to destabilize American society.